Hi, you guys. This is Ms. Knight here. Today we're going to start our geometry unit, and I'm going to be discussing with you parallel lines and angle relationships inside of those. First, we're going to start off with some vocab. I'm going to put the word and the definition on, and then I'm going to show you guys a picture of what it would look like. The first vocab word we're going to have is called transversal, and what it is it's a line that intersects other lines. So hopefully you guys remember parallel lines. Whoa, hold on. Parallel lines are lines that will never touch. So we are going to be dealing just with parallel lines in this lesson. So if we have parallel lines showing their parallel, remember we draw the extra arrow tips on them. And the transversal, it's just a line that intersects them. So that could be a transversal. It could be going in any way. It's just some line that intersects other lines. And for us, we are going to be using parallel lines. Okay, the next word we're going to have is corresponding angles. Those are angles that are in similar positions based on the intersection of the parallel lines and a transversal. So what I did over here, I just recopied two parallel lines being cut by a transversal. So corresponding angles, they're in a similar position. So what I kind of like to look at is you look at each of the intersections. So kind of like on a road, you know, the intersection. So, oh, hold on, I was using yellow. It's not showing very well. So we have the parallel line and the transversal crossing. That would be one intersection. And then down here is the second intersection. So the way I think of corresponding angles, it's going to be the angles that are in the same position. So for example, if I'm looking at this angle up here, that is the angle that is on the top of the intersection. The corresponding angle with that would be the one right here, because that is also on the top of the intersecting angles. I am going to show you guys other corresponding angles because there's multiple. If we want to deal with this angle down here that I just put in red, that is to the left of the intersecting transversal and parallel line. And the corresponding angle would be this one right here, the other intersection, the one on the left. If we keep going, the one on the bottom, that corresponds with the one on the bottom. And then the one on the right corresponds with the one on the right. And the kind of cool thing about if we have corresponding angles is that they are congruent. So they are always congruent. And hopefully you guys remember what congruent means. It means they are equal. Okay, so for the ones that I drew in this diagram, the blue ones with the star, let's say that top degree, let's say this top angle is, I don't know, 150 degrees. That means this one down here is also 150 degrees, and so on and so forth. As an aside, the symbol for congruent, it's a little tilde on top of an equal sign. That is how you would say two things are congruent instead of having to write the whole word. So corresponding angles, they're in the same position based on the little intersections, and they are always equal to each other. All right, the next type of angles we have are called alternate exterior angles. They are two angles that are outside of the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. Hopefully the word alternate makes you think that they are on opposite sides, right? Because when things alternate, they kind of go back and forth, opposite sides. And then the next thing is exterior, which should hopefully make you think outside, right? The exterior, it's the outside of something. So I'll show you on the parallel lines and transversals that I've copied for this one, what alternate exterior angles are. So if we have, again, we'll just start with blue, this angle up here, notice that is outside of the parallel lines. Okay, just to kind of show you, inside would be in here, right? So these are on the outside. So they're outside the parallel lines, and it needs to be on the other side of the transversal, the other one. So it needs to be outside, and it's going to actually be down here. Because if you notice, the one up top is on this side of the transversal, and the one on the bottom is on the other side, which is down here, okay? So those are one set of alternate exterior angles. and they are, again, congruent, which means they are equal. So whatever measurement one has, the other has the same. There's only one other set of alternate exterior angles, and that would be the other set that are outside the parallel lines. So the red one I just drew, if we go to the other side of the transversal and the other side of the parallel lines, it would be right over here. And hopefully you can kind of see that the two blue angles, they look equal, and the two red angles also look equal. So those are pairs of alternate exterior angles, and really, really, really important to remember that they are congruent. So that means they are equal as well. Okay, the next word we have is alternate interior angles. Hopefully you recognize that, again, it says alternate, which means opposite sides, just like last time. But the difference here is they are now interior angles, which means they must be inside the parallel lines. You can kind of think of like an interior designer, right? It's someone who decorates the inside of a house. Okay, so interior means inside. So for these angles, I would have, let's say, one right here, right? This is inside of my parallel lines. It's on one side of the transversal. For its alternate interior angle, it needs to still be inside the parallel lines, but on the other side of that transversal. So it would be right there. Similarly, as the alternate exterior, we have one more, and they would be, again, on the inside. So this angle right here, the purple one I just drew, the alternate interior angle to that is the other one that is inside the parallel lines and on the other side of our transversal. So right there. Just like alternate exterior and just like corresponding angles, these are also always the same. And again, it should kind of look like that, like in the picture that I have over here. The green angles look to be about, open the same number of degrees, and the purple angles also look to be about the same. So just remember, these are also always congruent. The next thing we have are called co-interior angles. These are angles that are both inside. Hopefully when you guys see the word interior and then co, right? They are both inside. Co-interior angles, they're angles both inside the parallel lines and on the same side of the transversal. So that is different in this one. They're on the same side of the transversal. Another different thing about this is that they're supplementary. Hopefully you remember that from middle school, I think. And that means that they add up to 180 degrees. So I'm going to label them in our drawing just like before. So co-interior, so they have to be inside the parallel lines. So remember, inside is somewhere in here. If you think of them like train tracks, it's on the inside of the train tracks. So co-interior, let's say we have this angle right here. The one that is co-interior with that would be the angle right here, also inside, and they're on the same side of that transversal. The other pair we have would be the one right here, the green one, and it would match up with the green one over here. So again, inside and on the same side. So if we're dealing with actual measurements, if they have to add up to 180, let's say that this purple angle down here is 100 degrees. That means the purple angle up here has to be 80 degrees because together they need to add up to 180. Those are the main types of angles that we are going to be dealing with. I know it can get a bit messy when you are drawing, but I hope that you guys were able to get these down. Maybe take a screenshot of this if you have it. We're going to be doing some examples where first we just need to find values based on what kind of angle they are. So if they're congruent or if they add up to 180. And then we're going to do some with algebra. One thing to hopefully recognize in this, you guys, is the ones that add up to 180 are just the co-interior. Alternate exterior, alternate interior, and corresponding, those are all congruent, so the same value. So hopefully you guys are taking notes with this, and we're going to get into some examples right now. Okay, example 1, what we need to do is we need to state the angle relationship and find the value of x. So we need to figure out, if we look at this picture, we have two parallel lines, although to be honest, I'd be a bit upset with them because they didn't have the double arrows, so I'm just going to add those in really quick. It is being cut by a transversal, and we have two angles in question. So they wrote right here that we have 110 degrees down there, and we need to find x up at the top. So first of all, we need to identify what kind of relationship these angles have with each other. I noticed that they are both outside the parallel lines, and one is on the bottom of the transversal and one is on the top. So I know that they are alternate exterior angles. And if you look up at your definitions up top, you should see that alternate exterior angles are always congruent, which means they're equal. So if the angle at the bottom is 110 and they are equal, that means that x also has to be 110 degrees. Okay, so that would be the full answer, alternate exterior angles and 110 degrees. Okay, so the same directions. This problem now has our parallel lines and our transversal. Notice they're oriented differently. Instead of the parallels being horizontal, they're going at a diagonal way. It's still going to be the same rules. So if you guys want to pause it and see if you can figure out what the relationship is and then the value of x, I'm going to give you time to do that right now. Okay, so for this, I have the 115 degrees and the x. I notice that they are both on the same side of my transversal, and they are both inside the parallel lines. So that means they are what we call co-interior angles. And if you remember from our definitions up above, you can either rewind and look back, or you should have them written down in your notes. We know that these are what we call a supplementary, which means they have to add up to 180. So the way I'm going to solve for x is I know it should add up to 180, should be what 115 plus x is. So to solve for x, I'm just going to subtract 115 from both sides. Cancels out, and I get x equals, now maybe you can do this in your head, maybe you need a calculator, maybe you're just going to solve it, but you should end up with 65 degrees. So x is 65 degrees, and these are co-interior angles. What we're going to be getting into now is a similar sort of thing, except for we're going to now be needing to solve equations, kind of like what we actually just did right here. All right, so for example 3, what we're going to need to do is again state the angle relationship and then solve for x. So if you guys want to pause, you can pause and try to solve it yourself, or you can watch as I go along with this one. So I notice I have 132 right here and x plus 139 up there. When I see both of those, they're on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're both inside the parallel lines. So that means that these are alternate because they're on opposite sides of that transversal. They are both interior and then angles. Okay, so that would be the relationship. And now we need to solve for x. If you remember from above, alternate exterior angles are what we call congruent, which means they are equal. So I'm going to set each of these things equal to each other. So 132 has to equal x plus 139. Now we just have to solve for x. Again, hopefully you can do this in your head at this point. If not, to get x by itself, we're adding 139. The opposite of that is subtracting 139. If you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other side. They cancel out, and what you end up with is x equals -7, right? Because we're taking away more than we have. So we get x equals -7, and they're alternate interior angles. The next question is going to be the same directions, but it's going to be a different sort of angle relationship. So let me get that up for you. All right, so again, the directions are the same as before. We have two angles. We need to state the angle relationship and then solve for x. Pause now, and when you come back, the working out will be on here for you. So go ahead and start solving this. All right, if you solved it on your own, hopefully you got the same thing as this. So we get corresponding angles, and that means that they are congruent. So I set them equal to each other. So 75 has to equal 11x minus 2. isolate the variable, so I add 2 to both sides. Then I'm going to divide by 11 on both sides, and I end up with x equals 7. I'm going to do one more, and then you guys are going to get into the bookwork. All right, here is example 5 for you. Again, I'd like you guys to please pause, draw it, and try to solve it yourself. We again have 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal. We need to name the angle relationship that we see and then solve for x. So we have one angle is -1 plus 14x, and the other one is 12x plus 17. So go ahead and solve this one, and when you push play again, I'll have the answer and the working out on the screen for you. And this is what you should have for this one. They're what we call alternate exterior angles, both on the outside of the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. We know that those are congruent, so I set them equal to each other. Need to get the variables together, and that is what we are doing in this step right here. I noticed that it's always easier to move the smaller variable because then you end up in positive. So I subtracted 12x from both sides. Then what I did was I added 1 to both sides. And I did this last step in my head, which I think you guys are perfectly capable of doing. 2 times what number equals 18? You should know that that's 9, and I really think you guys can do that. So what you guys are going to do after this, you guys are going to go ahead and start on the bookwork. It is bookwork 7.1, and that is what you guys are going to be doing for today. I hope this made sense. I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you have a great week this week. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.